What's going on, guys? I have had in my possession the Rig MGX wireless mobile controller for Android smartphones in my possession for several days now, and I have played quite a few games on it. So today I'm going to post for you guys my full review of this device. Now, this review is actually going to be published in sort of two videos, two companion videos, because I know the people on my channel, my viewers, want to know how well this thing works in general, but they also really want to know how it works specifically on two different sorts of devices. One being Surface Duo or Duo 2, and the other one being Samsung's Z Fold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two videos that are going to be really similar. Some parts are going to be absolutely identical. The parts we're just talking about, the hardware, things that apply to both, are going to be in both videos, but more specific stuff about how they work on each device and how gaming works on each device, those will be split into their own video. So you don't have to sit through stuff you don't care about. They'll be separated so you guys can watch the version that you do want to watch. So whichever version this is, if this isn't the one that you wanted to see, the other one's probably coming very, very soon, next day or so. Maybe I post them at the exact same time. I don't know. I don't plan this stuff out before I go. But without further ado, let's talk first just about the hardware itself. So this is the MGX wireless mobile controller, of course available on Amazon, affiliate link down below, $79.99. A little bit on the expensive side, but it does feel quite premium. We're going to get into that very, very shortly. Designed for Xbox/Android. You'll notice that the buttons are Xbox style buttons, universal fitted, accommodates any device up to 6.7 inches. So some devices, you got to measure your device, measure it long ways, and if you're over 6.7 inches, you're not going to fit in this thing. My wife's Z Flip 3 is actually too tall to fit in this controller. So before you buy it, if you're buying it for something other than the Fold or the Duo, make sure that it does fit the device. Pocket size comfort, portable precision, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's actually now look at the thing firsthand in my hands using our overhead camera. All right, so here we go. The first thing I noticed when I unboxed this thing, and if you want to see the unboxing, that is in its own separate video, which will be in the description as well, is that it feels quite rigid and quite premium. I had another telescopic controller like this that had a lot of flex and bend to it. This has almost none. And as far as the actual mechanism that, like, where it pulls apart, it is extremely sturdy. It wants to pull back very hard. This thing overall feels very good. This is a rubberized texture here, and then on the back you get these two nice kind of grip areas, almost like the Steam Deck, that are also rubberized for a nice grip. The buttons all generally feel pretty good. You can see you've got your A, B, X, Y buttons up here, which are color-coded exactly the same as a real Xbox controller. The overall look, the fit and the finish, I mean, this looks like an official Xbox sort of a peripheral, even though it is in fact not an official Xbox peripheral as far as I'm aware. This is obviously not made by Microsoft, perhaps licensed in some way to have the official Xbox button. I don't know exactly how that would work, but the buttons themselves, they feel pretty good. They're you know, somewhat clicky. They bottom out nicely. Nice resistance there. I think that these buttons, the face buttons, are quite good. Perhaps you can hear them. The joysticks are okay. Anytime you're going to use a mobile joystick like this, they're going to always be a little bit smaller than the real McCoy, something on a proper controller. So you have to deal with that. Less room to move around. But in the games I've been playing, I'm not going to play first-person shooters on something like this anyways, really. But the games I've been playing, they work well enough. They do click, so you have L3 and R3. The D-pad, I think, is pretty decent. Nothing really to write home about. It's not, you know, as good as like a Nintendo D-pad is, but I think it's relatively good. Your bumpers are very clicky and very responsive. But your shoulder buttons kind of go the analog route, where instead of clicking, they just sort of go down, kind of like the original sort of like these Xbox controllers do. I almost said the original Xbox. That's not true. Where they sort of are analog, and different levels of pressure are going to be defined in the game differently. We have a similar thing being mimicked here, although it's really rigid. Like, it really pushes back hard, and it almost feels like one of those old controllers that has the rubber membrane, but the membrane has slipped out of where it's supposed to be, so it almost feels broken, but it's not, and it's something that I've been able to mostly get used to. All in all, the fit and finish is really, really good. All the buttons feel good. It feels really nice in the hand. There's one complaint I have with this thing in terms of the build quality. It's something that I discovered very, very quickly. When I've tried to put, I believe it was my Z Fold into this thing, it's very hard to pull apart. And what happened was it slipped out and it hit this joystick. And I'll show you here, the joystick just popped right out. And I thought, oh, great, I've just gotten the thing, and I've already managed to break it. It takes such a small amount of force to pop these joysticks out. But there's good news here, because it just pops right back in, like this. And it's back in, and everything's fine. I've popped the other one out as well. Just pulls right out. It's entirely too easy to pull these joysticks out. And even though you can just pop them right back in like it's no trouble, you know, you're pulling this thing out of your pocket or something, you're liable to pop that joystick off and lose the thing, and then you're just up the creek without a paddle, as they do say. So when you pair this thing with the Surface Duo or Duo 2, you immediately get something that is novel, that is different, that I would almost say is unique, but of course Nintendo has done this. You basically get a Nintendo DS style situation. The only kind of thing you got to think about here is the fact that you've got a little lip right here. So you have to make sure that the Microsoft logo is facing down, but otherwise, installing it is extremely simple. You're just going to kind of grip it onto there like so, and you're pretty much good to go at that point. And this screen can fold up just like that. And yes, you do have what you could consider to be the ultimate Nintendo DS situation. I do want to point out that if you decide to pair this with the original Surface Duo, you don't have this big camera. So let's look here real quick. I'm gonna do this live because someone wanted to know, could you put the thing into phone mode and then use it like this? And I feel like you probably can. So let's set it down here and let's drop in there like that. And do we feel like that is okay? Obviously the screen is able to kind of move around, which is a little bit odd to look at and to see. But yeah, you could definitely do this. And you may be wondering, you know, Shane, why would you want to do this? Isn't kind of the point that it is a dual screen type of situation when you're playing games on this? Well, there's two reasons I can think of immediately that you might choose to do this instead. One is that unlike with the Fold and with this in dual screen mode, you don't have a whole lot sticking up over the top here. It's actually really, really close to being the perfect size for this thing. And then reason number two, as I release it from its hold and then I put it back in there in dual screen mode, is that when you're in this situation here, as I'm just launching apps left, right, and center, if you want to get rid of this top screen, you really kind of can't. You can do that, which, I mean, I don't really know how much fun that's going to be. I mean, I guess you could do this if you wanted to get rid of a screen, but it's a little bit awkward. So putting it in phone mode does make some sense in that regard. Now, of course, on Duo 2, that is not going to be an option for you. So I'm going to show you one thing you can use to maybe get rid of that top screen, to at least shut it down so that it's out of your way. There's actually an app in the Play Store that is called Duo Mono, and you'll see the icon for it right there. And all Duo Mono does is, at first I was like, man, how is it going to shut off the screen like this? Clearly it's doing it. Well, what it's actually doing is it's just displaying black, which, if I'm being honest, on an OLED display is just kind of the same as shutting it off. So if you don't want to have that top screen running all the time and you don't like doing this thing where it's flipped around the back side, that's kind of awkward and weird to look at as well. Well, Duo Mono might be the way to go. So you may have noticed that the way that I actually install this thing and take it out is like this. I set the thing on the table. With the Duo, this works perfectly because Duo is a little bit of a thick boy. But if you set it down on the table and you open it up like this and just kind of slide it on top of it like that, that seems to work really well. And the reason that I'm doing this actually calls back to the segment that I talked about my biggest issue with this thing, is that when you're trying to put it in this way with it facing up, I had a tendency for it to slip and to just knock my joystick clean off. It would go flying, and that's a really bad thing to have happen. So to avoid that, I tend to set the whole thing down to take it off and to put it on, and that as you can see, is very reliable and works really well. Now, in addition to just the overall hardware of this thing and kind of how it looks with the Surface Duo or Duo 2 in it, which, by the way, I think that it looks quite nice. Even closed, it looks quite sophisticated and intentional and nice. And then when you open it, it looks like the strangest thing that you've ever seen. We should also talk about the weight. So let's pull out the handy dandy scale and let's let it configure. And let's put this on there and see what we're looking at. 494 grams. That is quite heavy. And trust me, you will start to feel that weight after a little while, but it's not the end of the world, okay? Like, it's heavy for sure, but it's not that bad. And a lot of that is because of the ergonomics. I actually really like these grips back here. They feel quite nice in the hand. It's rather large, it's kind of thick, and I think that kind of makes the weight not be that big of an issue. Now, something else that's worth pointing out here, there's a lot of controllers like these that will have a USB-C port down here so that your phone of choice will plug in while it's being used. Now, I do want to mention, because I forgot to, this thing does charge via USB-C, which is like fan-freaking-tastic. Thank you for doing that. But this controller, you can see, has no USB-C port, okay? It's just empty on both sides. Now, some people are going to prefer the ones that have that USB port because you're going to have less latency on your controls. This is communicating wirelessly to your device of choice. So if you want something that is zero latency, maybe look for something like that. But I'm going to tell you why I prefer no USB-C port. First off, I cannot perceive any latency from this thing to your controller. Now, some people can perceive stuff like that on a much different level than apparently I can. I can't tell that there's any problem at all. And then the other thing that allows is it allows just universal compatibility, right? So I've got my USB-C port there. That means that I would have to figure out exactly, you know, which orientation that I'm able to put this thing in at. You know, it would have to be like this if it's over here. If it were over here, I don't know how. I guess it'd be hanging off the end. You know, the fact that there's no USB-C port here means that any device that, you know, fits the dimensions this way is able to stick into this thing and then be usable. Another factor that is relatively important, whether you are using a Surface Duo or you are using something like a Z Fold, which is going to go in one of your pockets, is the portability factor. This is something you're going to be able to bring with you. It is relatively large, right? There it is next to the Fold, and there it is next to the Duo. This is not a small device. Is this something that you could, in fact, put in your pocket? Probably kind of not, but let's try. So my phone usually goes in here. Is this going to go into the front pocket? Kind of, if you wanted to, but that's not super comfortable. And then you'll watch that joystick there. What about in the back pocket? Maybe a little better in the back pocket, but I mean, I think ultimately the pocketability thing is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but perhaps in a bag or something like that, probably going to be okay that way. So none of that really means anything if it's not fun to game on. So let's take a look here at what the gaming experience is like with this. And the biggest thing, the most obvious thing, is that the gaming experience is going to be similar. The closest analog that we probably have to something like this is going to be Nintendo's DS, because you have two screens. It may be crazy to point that out to you, but you've got two screens, and that's going to change the way you're going to experience gaming with this controller. So one thing to look at too, it does add some weight to the top, right? It kind of makes it a little tippy over. You can see there, like there's a little bit of a gap there where it wants to kind of to rock back. There's some weight up there, so that is going to add to your or subtract from your ergonomics a little bit. So my favorite way to game on this thing might be different from some other people, because I don't really game all that often on my phone natively on my phone. What I tend to do is I tend to use something called Moonlight, which you're going to see here in a moment. And what Moonlight does is it takes games on your PC, on your computer, and it streams them over to your mobile device. So I'm going to launch Minecraft Dungeons here right now, and on my computer, now you can see my desktop, my computer is firing up Minecraft Dungeons, and it is going to stream this experience. And the biggest thing that you're going to notice here is that there is really effectively no configuration needed in any way, shape, or form. And that's primarily because this is an Xbox controller, and your PC knows how to use it, and your PC is going to see this effectively as an Xbox controller. So I'm going to be able to just use my controls exactly as I'm used to using them on when I'm playing this exact game on my PC. The visual quality of it is quite good. The latency is effectively non-existent. You can see me here moving around. You can see as soon as I stop hitting the joystick, I stop moving. If we go over here to the little punching bag, the little dummy over here, you'll be able to see that there is really no latency at all. And that speaks to how good Moonlight is, and it also speaks to the lack of latency on this controller. This is excellent. Okay, I absolutely adore playing this game this way because there's not really like an Android version of this game, and I love that my progress carries over because I'm playing this from my PC, so I can go into my living room, pick this game up, play for a little while, go run through some missions, and then come back into the computer room here, the studio later, to play with some friends, pick up right where I left off. And at the same time as I'm doing this, I could go ahead and I could launch a YouTube video. I was watching a video of Undisputed earlier talking about old Baker Mayfield. And guess what, guys? That's totally fine. You can do this just fine. There's no problem at all, no interference at all. The only thing you have to remember is that if the last thing you touched was this screen and then you try to use the joystick, it's going to be controlling that. So you got to remember to touch your game after you're done. But other than that, it's fine, okay? Like, let's close that out and let's launch something like Discord. Could you enter a voice channel and be chatting? Absolutely. You 100% can. So just like on my computer, let me leave there before someone sees me in there and gets confused and joins me. Just like on my computer where Discord is on this monitor over here and my game's on this monitor, that is replicatable with this setup, and it's really, really good. So just know that from here on, whatever game is here, a second task can always be up here, right? Discord is free to be there at any time. So I'm actually going to use Duo Mono just so that that's not kind of in the way and maybe blowing things out as I move around. But just know that it's always there, any of these. Always an option. So let's jump into, let's just do standard normal Minecraft now, and I'll show you kind of how that works on here as well. And you may be shocked to find out that there is effectively no configuration needed to play this game. The controller just, again, it sees an Xbox controller and it knows what to do with this, and it's going to work exactly as you would expect. Here we are in a world that me and some friends worked on for a really long time. The controls are responsive, they're fine, you can jump, you can swing your axe, everything is exactly as you'd expect. The controls are on screen. Hey, there's your crafting menu, there's your inventory, it's all on screen there. It's telling you exactly what to do, what the buttons are, all correspond correctly. It's like a proper gaming experience here, and it works great. If you were wondering, this is your home button, effectively, when you're in Android. So if you wanted to know what that actually functioned as, that's what that's going to do. But Minecraft, awesome. Now a game, or an emulator, I should say, that everyone wants to see is Drastic, because that is a DS emulator. So let's continue where I left off last. This is a Pokemon game. Now this is fine, right? You could do this, but look, we have two screens. So let's span this bad boy, and what you've got now is something I really don't think literally anything else can touch. This is something that even the actual DS is not going to be able to compete with. It's too much, it's too good, and it works absolutely wonderfully. And the cool thing about this is that you see I've got my controls down here. Let's actually go ahead and toggle those controls away to take it up a notch. And then if I were to like go into my menu here, I can reach over and it's a touchscreen, right? Because the DS is a touchscreen. So this bottom screen is going to work as you would expect it to on the actual DS, right? So this is something that I think is like I said, just a next level experience. Any DS game that you want to play is going to run beautifully on here. You can actually upscale it a little bit and make it look a little bit better. It's going to run excellent. And this is just awesome. Now, I'm not going to do 3DS emulation here. Just know that it's going to run really well. You're really not going to have any problems. But the reason I didn't want to do it is because I started to look into it, and I got into encrypted ROMs and de-encrypted. And I just not something I wanted to be bothering with to get into. It was too much of a chore to set up. But trust me, with the SoC on board here, Just like you saw with DS emulation, the 3DS emulation is going to work just as well. The same experience is going to be there. So let's go ahead and move on to another emulator called My Boy, which is a Game Boy Advance emulator. We'll go ahead and run Duo Mono back up there again, and let's grab Super Mario World. And once again, we should be able to turn off that virtual keypad to improve this experience further. So let's go into single player. And in this instance, you're going to want to use that D-pad, which is why I selected this. You're not going to want to play joystick with Mario. And you can do the thing you're normally going to do, where you put your finger on the B button, and then you're going to be rocking your finger back onto the A button to jump. That's how I've always played this game, at least. Maybe I'm the only one. But it does work relatively well. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to, right? Because it's a different D-pad than what you're probably used to on a Nintendo device. But once you get used to it, I really think you're going to be able to kind of roll and play exactly like you did before, or pretty doggone close. Here's a really obvious one, right? What about Xbox Game Pass? So let's load that up. You can stream games through your Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription, cloud settings. You can stream this directly to your device of choice. And I've already shown you Minecraft Dungeon, so I think it's fair to, since I've shown it to you streaming over Moonlight, come on now, let's see how it compares on Game Pass, right? So rather than streaming from my computer, which is here in the house, locally, we're going to stream it from Microsoft's servers. And I'll show you what the difference is, because there is a big difference. The first thing that isn't different, though, is that the Xbox controller works as you'd expect. The Xbox button, it triggers the Xbox button's stuff just like a real controller would. But other than that, the biggest issue that I have with Game Pass streaming continues to just be the latency. Okay, so even though I'm on fast internet, right, like I've got fast enough internet, there still is just some latency. And I don't know how well this would work on 5G. I imagine it would be even worse. But if we come down here to my little punching bag, I should be able to demonstrate what the latency is here. So I'm going to hit A. You can see, is that enough to make this unplayable? No, it isn't. But is it there? Absolutely it is. So in a pinch, right? Like maybe you don't have a gaming PC and this is the only way you're going to be able to play something like this. Could you do it like this? Absolutely you could. Okay? Absolutely. And there are a ton of games in the Game Pass lineup that you could play, right? Back 4 Blood, Hitman, Grounded, Anacrusis, all games I've played relatively recently. Tons of games that would all work with this controller, and they would all work just like you were using a real Xbox controller. As for some native games, I know a lot of you guys were asking for things like PUBG Mobile and Call of Duty Mobile. And we're not going to be testing those today because they do not have native controller support. Now, I fully understand that you can download a third-party app and you can make it kind of be able to fake your way through it. But all of these apps had weird, bad reviews, up and down reviews. Most of them, you require me to pay for them. And a lot of them just look sketchy and strange. So, and on top of that, you could also argue that that's kind of cheating if you're using a controller in a game that doesn't support controller and everyone else has to use a touchscreen. So we're not going to be doing that, but just know if you wanted to play PUBG Mobile or Call of Duty Mobile, go into the Play Store, maybe Google it first and find out which one is the least sketchy, and you can do that as well. But a game that does natively support controllers is something like Asphalt Legends. So there I am again from the prior video in my Lancer Evo, and I think, yeah, okay, so I've got manual controls already on. You can see here, double press the left trigger to perform a 360. Why would you want to do that? It's not right. But this, I mean, look, this is pretty good, right? This is your sort of arcadey racing game experience. It looks good. It's running really, really well. I don't know why my car feels so much slower than everyone else's. I guess I got a nitrous boost constantly on my poor little. He just did a 360. Let's do this thing. Look at that. This is your pretty typical arcade racing experience. So I'm gonna wreck this guy. Well, at what cost? At what cost, really? But if this is something that you enjoy playing, these sorts of arcadey racing games, I mean, you've got a really good free option here that works right out of the box with this controller. For a game that is extremely different from Asphalt 9, how about Stardew Valley? All of this stuff works natively, no configuration needed. Everything just works straight out of the box. You've got a big, beautiful screen, which you can actually do some touchscreen stuff with as well, right? You can actually kind of, do a little bit of both. If you want to use a controller for some things to move around, you can kind of move back and forth, and it's going to work exceptionally well. And the last thing that I want to show you is going to be another emulator. Let's close all these out just to make sure that we don't run poorly because of all this stuff stacking up. Let's go ahead and open up Dolphin, which is a Gamecube emulator. And we're going to need to go in and actually configure the controller here. So we're going to go to emulated, and we got to go through here. We got to actually tell it what buttons we're using. It's one of the few things, one of the few apps that I've used, emulator or otherwise, that didn't just already somehow know what it should be doing. But you can see this is not very difficult. And once it's configured, it is configured across the board. So let's launch The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. We should also be able to here overlay controls, toggle all, and go back into it. And we should now have a pretty clean experience here for The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, which if I load in here, should be fairly impressive. Here we are, we're playing Wind Waker. Goodness gracious. I'm really used to third-person games having inverted camera controls, so when I hit left, it goes left. I expect it to go right, and that really throws me off. But this is running well, this is running well. This is totally playable. You could probably go in and up some settings and actually make it artificially look even better than it does. It's a little bit blurry, but again, this is a GameCube game. But as far as the controls go, it's great. It controls wonderfully. So what's the final verdict on this thing? I mean, it's not cheap, and there are other alternatives out there. I've had a lot of people say, hey, you should test the game, sir, whatever, or this, that, and the other thing. I would love to test every controller on the market. Unfortunately, I do not have the money to be able to do such a thing. I would love to do it. I just can't. Stuff is expensive. This is $80. This is not cheap, but compared to the things I've used in the past, it is miles and miles better than the $40 similar controller that I was using before. So do I like this? Do I think it's worth the $80 in a vacuum? Just based on what I have used, I would say absolutely this thing is really, really good. As I said, if you want to buy this thing, there is a link in the description, which is an affiliate link, which means that if you purchase it, I get commission off of that sale. If you choose to do that, extra big thanks for you. And check out the comments. I'm sure other people are going to be suggesting other controllers as well that maybe at a cheaper price point that may have features that you find to be more important. For me, this is a really good fit. For you, maybe find something else if something about this just doesn't line up well for you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching this entire long video. If you did do so, I will see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.